Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Crazy day. One of these kind of days where you just go, beam me up, Scotty. If the religious right is correct and the end times are upon us and the spaceship is coming and they're going to be left behind, folks, and, you know, the beam is coming now, please let's go. Because the stories that I came across this morning just wanted to hit myself in the head a bunch of times. In fact, I have, because Watch the Water was trending on Twitter, and evidently a documentary by the Q Kooks. Evidently, the conspiracy is COVID. It has something to do with Satan, and I don't quite get it. I'm waiting for my Q folk to explain this a little bit better. Something along the lines of COVID-19 is actually something of a synthesized form of snake venom that has Satan's DNA in it, and that by drinking some kind of water, you end up ingesting it, and it's, and I'm going, whoa, wait a second. How did this, and I'm trying to figure out how. Is it the COVID-19? Is it the vaccine? Where did Satan's blood come from? There's so many questions. And look, it's easy to mock. It's easy to mock, but you know, where did Satan's blood come from? Is it Ted Cruz? Is Ted Cruz Satan? And you know, where's Dana Carvey when I need him? You know, wasn't he the church lady? Didn't he do the Satan? I mean, because that was in my head all day long, going, this, and look, you know, I remember being in school learning about, you know, horrible times in history where people were brainwashed and did really dumb things and allowed really bad stuff to happen. And I go, you know, I remember going, how could you let that happen? How could you remain silent? How could you fall for something as stupid as, you know, there's snake blood and Satan's DNA. What? But then again, you know, we lived through the pandemic where we watched people say, I don't need me no vaccine. I'm drenched in the blood of Jesus. And no one goes, maybe we need people in white coats to take that person away. There's a mental illness there. And look, I think there's a collective mental health crisis going on in this country, because this wasn't even the worst story of the day. This is the one that made me laugh. This is the one that brought a smile to my face. I'm going, Satan's blood. That's okay. Why not? I guess, you know, if you're going to have a conspiracy theory, a snake, you know, we got a book that's based on a snake and an apple and a tree and a rib and a pile of sand. Sure, why not? Makes for good fairy tales. But then I saw this, you know, a listener sent me a clip of Chuck Grassley at a town hall. And this is where it gets deadly serious. This is where you go, oh my goodness, people take this stuff serious. There's true mental illness in our world. Guy's asking Chuck Grassley about why, you know, basically why we're not supporting Putin, because Putin is fighting against pedophiles in Ukraine. Now, nobody's heard that before. That's new. Evidently, somewhere in his world, Vladimir Putin is out there fighting against some pedophile in Ukraine that we Now, are there pedophiles in Ukraine? Probably, sure, probably are. There pedophiles here. Are they rampant? Not the way the Q folk seem to think they are around every corner, and everyone they disagree with is a pedophile. And I don't remember that being Vlad's reasoning. But this guy was justifying what Putin was doing because they're pedophiles, because they're neo-Nazis and Nazis. They got the new ones and the old ones. They're biolabs, evidently. And you go, yeah, we've had labs around the world for a very, very long time. It's kind of insane. And just this laundry list of so much that they believe, that they've internalized, that they absolutely know to be true, that is just flipping nuts. And these are the people who, and this is what's most frightening about these folks. This is what's most frightening about what's happened on the Republican side, because these are the alpha personalities anyway. These are the people who, they think they know something. They're going to be the loudest in the room. Someone has given them a talking point. Someone has given them something to regurgitate ad nauseum, and they feel emboldened. They feel empowered to stand up and spew. And they do. And in this meeting, this person unabashedly spoke out, and he, without fear of reprisal, shame, or being mocked, and look, Chuck Grassley didn't mock him, as where any sane, rational person would go, where are you getting this stuff? What is wrong with you? Where someone should just shake them and go, I'm helping you. I'm helping you to, I don't know, rattle something between your ears. But this is what's gone on in this country for far too long, is we haven't called out insanity. We haven't called out people who are telling outright lies. In fact, we've got a whole F channel that does nothing but that. Because there's a whole media industry profiting mightily off of poisoning with, might as well say it, Satan's DNA and snake blood. Because, hey, they'll sell it to you. Hey, they got beet juice, got Satan's DNA in it. Who knows? Might have Satan's DNA in it. Can I not ask the question, does it have Satan's DNA in it? This is how crazy we've gotten. And these people feel empowered and emboldened because they believe. They believe. Now, I came across a thread. A gentleman's talking about he and his husband. Think what you want about same-sex marriage. I personally don't care. None of my business. Two people want to get married. God bless them. Hope they lead a happy life. It's on them. They have 2 children that they've adopted. They've decided to give a loving home to. Good on them. I hope the best for the kids. But as they're telling the story of riding on the Amtrak train, they said they had about a 9-hour pleasant ride until some man decided to jump up and begin screaming at him in front of their 6-year-old son. Remember what I told you. They stole you, they're pedophiles, at this child, at a 6-year-old. Turns out, this guy had seen this child in the bathroom and filled this kid's head with this kind of stuff. Now, here's where this gets interesting, because these are the people who are saying, the left, the gays, they're the pedophiles, they're the groomers, they're the ones in the bathroom doing all this nefarious stuff. And yet, where did this incident take place? That's right, in the bathroom. Now, me personally, if I'm one of these two gentlemen, I usher the children out of the room and I beat the living you-know-what out of this guy. There's nothing left of him when I am done. There's no tolerance. There's no understanding. There is nothing left of this. But that's just me. The restraint that these 2 guys showed, the tolerance that these 2 gentlemen showed, all I can say is they must be Buddhist, because I can't imagine showing you would have approached my child in a bathroom like this, and you would have said those things to my child about me. We would have had problems. Now this guy goes on and says, "Look, this guy was yelling at us, that mocking my family when I said, this is my family." He goes, "You're not a family. You're rapists. You steal Black and Asian kids." I mean, the most vile kind of things this person was saying on a train, and no one spoke up. And the reason I bring this up, and the story that this guy tells in Twitter form is just horrible. And you go, how did we get here? Look, you can be against gay marriage and you keep that to yourself. You can be against same-sex couples adopting children and you shut the blank up and you keep it to yourself. Because you know what? It's not on you. It's these moments when these people feel they have the right to attack people in public. And it's going to get worse. Trust me, this is going to get much worse. And understand, this is not my field of interest. This is not my want to be talking about these topics. Gay marriage? No, not my interest. Abortion? Certainly not my field of interest. But these are people who want to repeal the America I grew up in, where we had decided law, where there was stability. They want to return us to a day, of desperation. They want to return us to a day of some kind of bizarre puritanical rule that, maybe it's not me today, but it's going to be, because none of us are going to be perfect enough. None of us are going to be ideologically aligned enough. And what happens if it's our children? Now, there was a story, I believe, from Connecticut. Vice had it. That this is one of those things where you just go, what is going on? Evidently, a school nurse in Connecticut found out that an 11-year-old girl was on puberty blockers. Now, I have no idea how I would react if a child of mine said, "Hey, look, I was born a boy, I want to be a girl. I was born a girl, I want to be a boy." I have no idea how I would deal with that. And I've been very open and honest. I don't understand it. I have friends who have transitioned. I still don't. I'm never going to understand it. But I do know one thing. I know the government should not be involved in that. I know I don't want their opinion. I don't want their guidance. I want nothing. I want them to have nothing to do with it. And I know the local school and the school nurse outing that to crazy right-wing groups so that I'm attacked in public is certainly not what should happen. This woman should be this Kathleen Cataford. She should have been fired immediately, if not sooner. And I'm hoping that they're going to sue this woman, as well as the school district, and that should happen. But again, all of these crazy right-wing groups went after this family and attacked them. This is a family issue. And these are the people who tell you we want smaller, less intrusive government. We want parental rights. Like I said, I don't know the answers, but I know what's not. It's like the Supreme Court said about obscenity. You'll know it when you see it. This is obscenity. Again, I don't know how I would react, but this ain't it. And for those of us who, again, not my issues, but I would hope in the moment, and this is where we've got to dig inside of ourselves and say, in the moment, we've got to stand up for what's right and what's decent. And when people are attacked, whether you agree with what's going on, when people are attacked in the most obscene ways, I think people have to stand up and say no more. And I fear this November is going to be a bloodshed moment in this country. I think electorally, I think Democrats are going to get just wiped out, and maybe that's going to be a good thing. Maybe the crazy of the crazy, maybe they're going to take over. And maybe we're going to have to live through a couple of years of real obscenity before the decent people who have been tolerating this kind of behavior and this kind of mental illness finally wake up and say no more. Maybe that's where we've got to go. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever come across something like this? Have you ever spoken out? I'd love to hear it. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never missed a second of the fabulous program that we do here. Again, make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. Quick break, right back. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Good old Herschel Walker. Yeah, Herschel Walker. Did you hear the clip of him on the Howard Stern show a couple years ago, saying that he plays Russian roulette because he just loves competition? You go, wait a second. How is playing Russian roulette competition? It's a luck of the draw thing. You were lucky not to blow your stupid brains out. I mean, that's not competition. There's no skill in that. There is you didn't blow your brains out. But hey, here's a guy who, not surprising at all. This is a guy who, evidently he claims he owned a bunch of companies that actually never existed. Again, not surprising. And also, hey, they're blocking out, and this is good. This is a good thing since he's going to be a senator from Georgia, I predict. They're blocking out policy time where they're going to have people come in with pictures and pop-up books, and they're going to explain how Senate works. Yeah, yay. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm not good. I'm looking at the world around me. I'm looking at the fact that Herschel Walker was probably going to sit in the U.S. Senate, and I'm going, I thought Tommy Tuberville was the bottom of the Senate barrel, and, well, a guy who, he thinks competition is not blowing his brains out. Somehow I guess we're going to go a little lower.
I know. Well, Herschel Walker, you know what, when I was married to my first husband, 40-some years ago, we used to laugh at him because he was so stupid. But anyways.
Yeah, but you married him.
Well, that was no, honey. My first husband wasn't
Oh,
stupid. He was a
okay,
very
okay.
intelligent man.
Got it.
Herschel Walker was stupid.
Got it, okay.
Okay. But
I caught on. I'm slow. Go.
Okay. You were saying about, what you would have done. Well, I'm going to tell you what. You would love my idea. I have this idea. It's called, we should add nationwide a new law. It's called simple aggravated assault. And what happens is you run across one of these lunatics and you just smack them around all you want. You go in front of the judge and you go, it was simple aggravated assault, Your Honor. They're freaking simple. I got aggravated, and thus they got assaulted. And the judge says, $10, and you go, hot dog, and it's a done deal.
I think that's how it used to be back in the old days. My grandfather would have loved that one.
But, they're crazy. I got into it. Well, my poor husband, he's like, my husband is the laid-back one. No, I'm laid back, but you don't want to push buttons. We're in Shop and Save, and they started on the poor little cashier girl because she had tattoos. Yeah. I was ready to throw down in the middle of Shop and Save, and my husband's going, settle down, you're going to get his throat out of Shop and Save. But I ran my mouth, and, that was that. So, yes, they're out of control.
Yeah.
And you're right. They are mentally ill. Many, many, many years ago, about a century ago, they actually used to have a mental illness that was called religious fanaticism. And literally, they would take people and they would put them in the mental institute till they got over it.
Yeah, but then we closed all the state hospitals, and now we've put them in churches. Yay.
I know. Wasn't Reagan wonderful? Sarcasm intended. Okay, you have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, look, I'm not mocking people of faith who work to be decent people. Look, I believe people of faith who use faith moderately and work to make themselves better. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about these extremists, these radicals, these people who every day, the judgmental ones who are, the people who are going to go on a train and attack somebody like this guy did. I mean, I'm worried for the direction of this country because, these are the people who are saying, this isn't the country I want to grow up in. Well, you can leave. It's scary, the kind of abuses that these folks are willing to heap on the rest of us. All because they're concerned about what everyone else is doing. I was reading an interesting bit. The New York Times has been doing these focus groups, and they had today was 8 conservative men, and it was hysterical because they all agreed. I can't speak my mind without fear of somebody, being upset by it. Yeah, because you're saying stupid stuff. Don't say outrageous stuff. Don't say dumb stuff, and people won't think you're an idiot. I mean, that has never changed. Even when I was a kid, if you said something dumb, someone slapped you, and you didn't say dumb stuff anymore. It hasn't changed. The difference is, and again, I've said this for years, the second we stopped letting little boys smack each other around in the sandbox is the second the country went to pot, because the people felt there was no recourse, and they could say whatever they want. And social media has just magnified this to where people are literally the worst of themselves. And they don't check their tone. They don't check their tongue. They don't not say the worst possible things. Now we seem to get attention for being the worst version of ourselves. And maybe what we need is we do need, some aggravated simple assault charges to happen. Now I would hope, and this is what I told a friend of mine today, is I would hope no jury in the land would ever convict on a scenario like that, because I know I wouldn't. I know if I were a jury of someone's peers and someone said, hey, they met my kid in the bathroom, called me a pedophile, said I was a rapist, and I beat the guy up, I wouldn't convict. Would you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1873. That was the day the single most deadly incident of the Reconstruction era occurred, known as the Colfax Massacre. As many as 150 black Republicans in Colfax, Louisiana, were slaughtered by white supremacists determined to destroy advances made by the formerly enslaved. Results of the 1872 gubernatorial election in Louisiana had been hotly contested. President Ulysses S. Grant ordered federal troops in to support the Republican winner, William Pitt Kellogg. A number of black radical Republicans had also won or retained local and state political positions. William Ward, a black Civil War veteran and militia leader, had won a seat in the state legislature. By the beginning of April, he and others were being threatened with attacks on the Grant Parish Courthouse in Colfax and lynchings by defeated white Southern Democrats. Desperate for backup, Ward and others left for New Orleans to appeal for federal reinforcement. On the holy Easter Sunday, ex-Confederates, Klansmen, and Democrats rode into Colfax armed with guns, rifles, knives, and a cannon. 150 black Republicans were ready to defend their courthouse. Fighting raged on for hours, but eventually black Republicans were forced to retreat and then were massacred. 97 whites were indicted on federal conspiracy charges under the 1870 Enforcement Act, designed to enforce civil rights and root out Klan terror. The case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and resulted in the ruling United States versus Cruikshank, which essentially gutted the Enforcement Act. Of the 97 indicted, 9 were tried and 3 were initially found guilty. The Cruikshank ruling eventually overturned their convictions and effectively marked the legal end of Reconstruction. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I think we can now say the obvious. The Republican Party has gone bull-goose bonkers. Its leaders have turned the once proud GOP brand into an unprincipled gaggle of corporate profiteers, hate-mongers, and screwball conspiracy theorists. They're so far out that the Hubble telescope couldn't find them. But where is my Democratic Party? Here's a transformative opportunity to forge a solid political coalition, a multiracial, urban-rural, farm-labor alliance based on fundamental principles and programs of fairness and opportunity for all. Isn't that what the party says it stands for? This is the prime time to demonstrate it, to reach out and unite ordinary Americans behind a national agenda of lasting progressive change. It's not like the party elders would have to start from scratch, for an energized, feisty movement of grassroots battlers against corporate greed and government injustice is already organizing, winning, and growing popular support all across the country. But rather than welcoming and building on the exciting advances of these popular movements, the party's old-line insider clique of big funders, consultants, and corporate politicos passively assume that the GOP's goofiness and nastiness will turn off enough voters that Democrats can win by default. Meanwhile, the establishment insists that Democrats only push modest incremental reforms so as not to offend corporate funders or spook moderate Republicans. Hello? Brilliant strategists. A primary function of the Democratic Party is to offend the corporate powers. Also, there are only about 6 moderate Republicans left in America, so appeasing them is not a big win, especially when it costs you the support of grassroots voters eager for a politics bold enough and big enough to end business-as-usual economics. This is Jim Hightower saying, as our own history teaches, it takes intentional gutsiness to create a politics that matters. Republicans won't do that. Will Democrats?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is one of those things where you just go, yeah, well, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, so anything could come out of her mouth. But evidently she was on a podcast with Lou Dobbs, and she's questioning the quality of people at the Department of Defense and questioning why anyone would join the military and how did she put it, why they would waste their time, you know, the way that they're treated. Why would anybody join the military? And this is one of those things where, you know, how low will these people go? And the answer is, well, pretty damn low, as we have seen. And like I said earlier, if you saw the video clip of the Grassley town hall where, you know, we're supporting Putin because he's fighting pedophiles, that's scary kind of stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, where things are, why we're where we are, and maybe is it going to get any worse? I've asked my good friend Joe Walsh to come talk with us. Joe is a former Illinois congressman, former presidential candidate, also talk radio host He is the host of the fabulous White Flag with Joe Walsh podcast with the Bravery Project. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, I always like to be with you. And to answer your last question, yes, it will get worse. It most certainly will.
Well, I've predicted, look, the Republicans are going to take over the House and Senate. It's going to be a bloodbath in November, I believe. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene will be the least of the crazy in the next House, because I think it's going to get worse, because I look at some of the people who are running. It can only get worse. And I think maybe that's going to be probably a long-term, maybe a good thing on a certain level.
Hey, Rick, the Democrats have a real problem, and I know you know where I'm coming from. I believe my former political party is the greatest threat to our democracy right now. And yet, the Republicans are going to take back the House. They're probably going to take back the Senate. And I got to tell you, Rick, we're talking about a political party that denies basic truths. They've given up on democracy, and they embrace authoritarianism. But if I'm a Democrat, I've got to do some soul searching, because this party, the Republican Party, is going to take back control in 22. And if the Democrats don't get their act together, they may take back the White House in 24. Democrats need to do some soul searching.
So where do you see that soul searching? Because, look, the inflation thing is just killing them. The fact that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are in the way, you can't get any legislation moved. That's a big part of it. What else do you see as a problem?
You may disagree with me, but I'm going to say it, Rick. I don't think the Democratic Party anymore knows how to talk to, listen to, relate to, or fight for working class, middle class Americans. I don't. I think
we don't disagree.
I think the Democrats are elitist. I think wokeism is important, but they're obsessed with issues that, as you said, right now, working class Americans don't give a you-know-what about. And they're pissed off at Democrats, these voters are, even though they know deep down the Republicans are dangerous.
No, we don't disagree on this. But one of the things that I talk about quite often is I like the fact that Jennifer Abruzzo at the National Labor Relations, the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board, is doing a lot of things to help working class folks. I think she's doing the right stuff. I think Biden is doing some really good stuff for working people. I just don't think we're seeing or hearing enough about it. And you're right. I think the mainstream corporate-controlled media is focusing on all of the wrong stuff. And I think Democrats have really drugged their feet on January 6th. I think they've really drugged their feet on a lot of things that should have been moving a lot faster. Their messaging is terrible. And you're right. On the working class issues, I've said for a very long time, when it comes to a street fight, Democrats will be happy to hold your coat, but they're not going to ball up their digits and get in there and swing away. And I want them to. More than anything do I want them to.
And Rick, who is that? I'm no longer a Republican, but Republicans will do damn near anything to succeed and win. Who is the Democrat who will fight? Who is the Democrat who will figuratively punch the other side in the face? I like Biden. Biden's 80 years old. I do not see a Democrat right now. I don't. And this is really striking. I don't see a Democrat who can get down and dirty and fight for the middle class. I don't.
I see. I'm going to go with, I like Tim Ryan. I like Sherrod Brown. I really like Sherrod Brown.
Yeah.
I like Andy Levin. I like some of those folks. But you're right. I mean, there aren't a lot of them. There aren't a lot of people who are going to, going to go to the mat. Whereas Republicans, and this is where I've been saying for a very long time, this isn't new. I mean, we're talking decades. And this is why I think the white working class has moved toward Republicans, is I think they believe that guys like you are going to fight for them, even if I believe you're fighting the wrong fights and pursuing the wrong policies and harming things in the wrong ways. At least you're putting up a fight. And I think that is something that the white working class, especially white working class males, are drawn to.
True. But Rick, let's not lose sight of the fact that the Democratic Party is losing the Hispanic working class vote more and more each election. they lose a little bit of the black working class vote every single election. I mean, think about this. We're paying what at the pump right now? And we've got leading Democrats talking right now about green energy. Right now? I mean, right now? And I don't think Biden has been able, I don't think he's done a very good job of banging heads in his own party to be unified on one message these past 2 years.
No, I don't disagree with that. And look, for me, I came out and I said, when he said we were going to do all the stuff in Russia, I said he should have come out. We're forgiving all gas taxes. We're going to pick this up with a windfall profit tax and go after any senator who votes against it, so that we make sure that we keep the gas taxes paid so we can fund our roads and all that stuff. But so that the prices didn't hurt as much. And then, using the strategic reserve to make sure we go after speculators. There are things that he could do beyond what's been done. But I like the fact that he's using some of the strategic reserve. I just wish it was a little bit more, strategic.
Well, and again, Rick, you and I may differ. I wish, and this is just a fundamental policy difference, but I think working class people get it, who work hard every day, live paycheck to paycheck, are paying for gas every single week. We need to be energy independent. We have a hell of a lot of energy here, and we need to be the greatest nation in the country, and use our entrepreneurs to figure out the best and cleanest ways that we can get our own energy here and always be energy independent. And I don't hear that talk from the Democrats at all.
Yeah, but this is where Joe, and we will agree on this. The difference is I would like to see us move in a direction where we should have been moving the last 40 years. The idea of building, solar farms,
yes,
and building more wind farms, geothermal, the next generation of technology. Yes. In this moment, this should be Manhattan Project kind of. We need to do this now. If not now, then when? Look, I know we'll probably disagree about the Keystone XL pipeline, but that was never going to help us, Joe. That oil was going into the international community. It was never staying here.
I know that. I know that about Keystone, and I agree with you about Keystone, and I agree with you about transitioning to clean, to green energy. But man, it's a transition.
Right.
We are not going to be there overnight. We're not going to be there. I mean, look, Putin does what he does, and you've got Democrats in Congress, AOC and others a few weeks ago saying, now this is our opportunity. Use this now to go to push real hard for green energy now. No, not now. Yes, transition, but that's not going to help pay for people who are paying for gas right now. It's got to be a transition. And Rick, Biden has done a lousy job of describing this.
No, Democrats need to do a much better job of getting out and really doing messaging better. But here's the thing, and this is where we can argue about gas prices. Reality is, a lot of this has to do with the big oil companies and the fact that they're trying to reap a lot of the benefits and the profits out of this. In fact, there was that call a couple of weeks ago where the energy company said we're not going to drill more. This idea that we need more leases, we need more. There are already leases out that you know as well as anyone. There are thousands of leases out there. They're just not doing it. So I said from the beginning, Biden should have done like FDR would have done. Let's nationalize the oil companies during this moment. We'll drill as much as we need to. And then once we get out of this crisis, you can go back to it. I think just the threat of that would make them drill more.
Well, bad policy, maybe the threat, but I don't think the Democrats, Rick, are even there. I don't think they would want to nationalize the oil industry to drill here because they don't want us drilling. I think the Democratic Party fundamentally, I believe, on this issue is not where most average Americans are. It is a transition, but Democrats present it like it's overnight, and we can't get there overnight.
Yeah, it's neither that or the other thing. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Joe Walsh, former Illinois congressman, former presidential candidate.
Rick, having said all of this, the Republicans are crazy and they're scary. and they're dangerous. And everything I'm saying to you right now as a former Republican is because I don't want the Republicans to take back the House and the Senate. That would scare the hell out of me. I wish I could shake the Democratic Party up, but I'm not a Democrat.
Yeah. No, and look, and this is helpful, and I think we should be having more of these conversations. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Joe Walsh, former Illinois Congressman, presidential candidate, 2020. His podcast, The White Flag with Joe Walsh. You can find that wherever you grab your podcasts. But here's the thing, Joe, and like you said, I think 2022 is going to be a bloodbath year. Fear I have out of this is I don't think that the Republicans are going to sit idly by and allow it to be a lame duck. I do think they're going to move on trying to impeach Biden. I do think it's going to be kind of an ugly couple of years. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
It will be an ugly couple of years. I know there's a lot of bluster, and you even had somebody like Ted Cruz come out and say we're going to impeach Joe Biden for what? I think at the end of the day, there's nothing they can do. But I do agree with you. They're going to spend 2 years doing whatever they can to investigate Joe Biden and investigate Hunter Biden and really just kind of make a big mess of things for 2 years. Because the overlay, Rick, here is that as soon as the Republicans take back control of the House and maybe the Senate, Trump early next year is going to announce he's running for president. And then once again, the Republicans are going to line up behind him. That's going to be the focus.
Now, do you think, I think Frank Luntz came out today and said that he doesn't think that Trump's got an iron grip on the Republican Party, that he's losing his grip on the party. Do you think Trump's losing his grip?
Not at all. And I get tired of people like Frank Luntz trying to tell the American, there's such wishful thinking going on here, right? So many of these pollsters, even like Republican pollsters like Luntz, deep down, they want Trump to go away. Deep down, every Republican in Congress, most everyone, wants Trump to go away. So there's a lot of wishful thinking, but bullcrap, no. His hold on the party has not lessened. When he announces he's running, Rick, no Republican will challenge him. That's all you need to know.
When I saw that, my thought went into two different directions. My thought was, is it possible Republicans are seeing, the craziness going on, the snake blood with the Satan's DNA stories and maybe trying to pull back a little bit, or where I think things could possibly go is further off the rails, and even Trump isn't crazy enough for where things are going. And that's where my mind is taking us, that even Trump is far enough off the beaten path for the Republican Party in this moment.
Well, Rick, that's a great point, because imagine that. Imagine another 8 to 10 Marjorie Taylor Greens in the House after this next election.
I do.
And that in a way that presents a weird opportunity for Trump, because he can be the Republican nominee and know he's got that crazy base, but he can come across to independents and even some moderate Democrats as not as crazy. I'm not saying he'll take advantage of this opportunity, but because the crazies in the Republican Party, I think you're right, are going to go even more off next year, it'll help Trump come across, I think, as more moderate, which is scary.
So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because where my thinking on this is this is going to happen. They're going to go further and further, because I look at some of the kooks that I run into. I look at some of the people who are running, and Boebert and Green are going to become kind of normal after this election, if you can imagine that. And I think there's got to be a collective moment in this country where we go, is this sideshow? Is this the way we want government to run? And we continue down that path, or there's going to be a correction. And I'm hoping that good, decent, honest people go, no, we need a correction. And I know you're shaking your head. And I'm hoping there's that moment where people like you, because look, in 2010, I thought you were off your flipping rocker. If you can come to sanity and we could have conversations I never imagined, maybe some of these folks, we can do it too. So I guess let me open it up, let you get your thought.
I love you like a brother. but I do not believe the course correction is coming anytime soon. In fact, Rick, I'll tell you this. I believe there'll be a third major political party, a viable major political party, before the Republican Party ever gets its act together. I don't believe the Republican Party ever will get its act together. So no, I don't see that course correction. I do believe there'll be something's going to replace it, though, because most Americans don't want that. But no time soon.
Well, going to be an interesting couple years. Going to be an interesting ride, if nothing else.
Rick, this is a revolutionary moment in American politics. I really believe that. Trump is just the latest, ugliest manifestation of that. We're in for a bumpy ride for a lot of years.
And I hope you'll be here with us and for a front row seat. Joe, I appreciate the time, man. As always, great stuff.
Always, Rick. Thank you, man.
Good stuff. Our good friend Joe Walsh. Make sure you check out his podcast. He was doing the F Silence one, now the White Flag with Joe Walsh. Make sure you get that. We'll get links out on how you can check that out. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you got a question, comment, thought, something, I want to hear it. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that 25 delegates from 17 cities gathered in Washington, D.C. to discuss forming a union for laborers. General laborers, who often perform some of the most backbreaking work on projects like digging canals and surfacing streets, were often blocked from joining craft unions as full members. The laborers in D.C. decided it was time to join together and formed the International Hod Carriers and Building Laborers Union. That was the beginning of the union that today is called the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA. The union published its first constitution in English, German, and Italian, reflecting the diversity of the members that they represented. At the convention, the delegates issued a Declaration of Principles. In it, they declared, quote, "We hold that all men are created free and equal, and that honor and merit makes the man, and that self-preservation is the first law of nature, and that he who would be free must strike the first blow." They then went on to describe their purpose, writing, quote, "First, to gather under one grand banner all of those who toil on buildings with our craft and calling. Second, to promote by all honorable means the social and financial standing of all those who wish to partake in the fruits of amalgamation. Third, to create general agitation for the purpose of making a universal 8-hour day to increase the wages of members of the craft. Fourth, to establish a system of conciliation and arbitration in different sections of our land. Fifth, to help members of the craft in securing lawful and profitable employment. For more than a century, LIUNA has fought for the rights of laborers."
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Well, I got to tell you, listen to Joe Walsh. It's not good days ahead. And look, he's got some accurate criticism. The administration, I don't think, has done a good enough job on messaging. I don't think he's done a good enough job on preparing for the costs of the oil inflation. And look, we've got a lot of things going on. Let's go to line one. We've got Jim from Chicago. Jim, how are you, buddy?
Good. Couple of things quickly. I know we were talking about the QAnon thing about the snakes and the blood of the devil. I recall one of Trump's advisors in the early days, a woman whose last name was Conway. Her first name escapes me. Her husband was a big Trump detractor. She was one that was big about presenting people with alternative facts. And I think anybody with half a brain could look at this and figure out what the fact is and what the reality is. And I would kind of probably stress to people to simply think like this in a way. An opinion is an opinion, and a fact is a fact. And look at the facts before you state your opinions. I don't know if I totally agree with you with the beating somebody up, but in the situation you talked about, I think it might be called for. And real quickly, I agree with you totally about the messaging. The Democrats, they need to get their act together. And Joe Walsh, I was kind of surprised to hear you're a fan of his. He said a lot of crazy stuff back in the day. Maybe he's found religion, but I myself liked him better when he was a singer. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jim. No, to be honest, Joe's had a conversion. You know, he realized he was a bit vitriolic in the day, and you know he's I think he came out at a time when Trump was a lunatic, and I give him credit for that. Now on policy stuff, we're going to disagree. But on this, on democracy, on saving this country, we're on the same page. We're kindred spirits. Let's go to Kurt on line 3. Kurt, how are you, buddy?
Hey, I'm good, Rick. How about yourself?
I am outstanding. What's on your mind, buddy?
I got something good for you. You're going to like this. So, my little political group, the Starfish Environmental Group, we're a 501c4 now. And I've always been against super PACs, but we're going to be a little bit different than what we know about super PACs. And our board of directors is made up of women of color, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we grow into now. And I think it's going to be really a really good thing for grassroots candidates that we support, that will be able to help them in ways that the grassroots candidates struggle with. And it's going to be a really good thing.
Good for you, brother. Yeah, and look, I wish they didn't exist, but you got to use the tools that are out there, and it's a tool that's out there that you've got to fight with. You can't be tying your hands behind your back. I know people, we can't use them. It is what it is. You got to use the tools that are available.
Right, and there is a way of using them in a good way instead of doing shady stuff and all that we know about these things. So
good for you.
We're working with Senator Jeff Merkley's staff on some legislative stuff, and I think this will, kind of give us a little bit more of a platform to be able to do things like that. And so there's some good things that are going to come from it, and I'll pass it your way when we get going here.
Outstanding. Appreciate it, Kurt. Keep up the good fight out there in Arizona.
All right. Thanks, Rick.
Yep. No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you got to put up the fight. While I'm predicting there's going to be, an electoral bloodbath in November, it's not certain. And this is where working people can stand up and fight back. As I said, I think Biden is doing for working people some good things. While I think the messaging isn't there, I think Democrats are scattered all over the map. They're not the Republicans. They're not run by one entity. They're the big tent. Remember that. They've got Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, which stand in the way of a lot getting done. In fact, speaking of Kyrsten Sinema, she came out and said that if they start negotiating again on Build Back Better and on anything else, one of her guiding principles is she's opposed to raising the corporate minimum tax. Sorry, can't raise those corporate taxes to pay for stuff that we need, even though we know corporate America is raking in massive profits. All this inflation that's going on, a lot of it is good old-fashioned American greed. Gouging. You remember that. We working people constantly stiffed by corporate America. But it's easy. It's easy to pit us against each other. I just had someone call me on my cell phone and say, you're not a working person. You don't know anything. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Going to take a quick break right here. When we come back, Some interesting stuff going on down in Texas. Some truckers that, well, I think we should be supporting. Quick break. Right back after this.
Methane increased a record amount for the second year in a row.
NOAA reports a disturbing increase in climate warming methane.
Americans buying a new vehicle will spend less on gas than they would have if we hadn't taken this step.
Biden administration tightens mileage standards for cars and trucks. Boston and L.A. shift to electric buses, plus...
They've been found in ocean and drinking water, in soil and air and food, but this is the first time they've been detected in living lungs.
Microplastic pollution now found in humans, too.
Everything is awesome. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Scientists have found microplastics in people's blood for the first time. So note to self, when disposing of large amounts of blood, remember to separate it into the right bins.
Helpful advice. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I hate to say it, but does not sound like there's a whole lot of good news in today's Green News Report.
Well, there's a little bit, so wait for it.
Oh, I'm waiting.
First up, global atmospheric levels of the extremely potent climate-warming gas methane increased by a record amount in 2021. That's according to NOAA, and it increased for the second year in a row. Methane matters because it is a big contributor to man-made climate change. It's about 25 times more powerful at trapping heat than carbon dioxide on short time scales. NOAA scientists speculate that the spike may be from nature. Wetlands contain decaying organic matter, which releases methane, but more intense downpours, turbocharged by global warming, can accelerate that release. That concerns researchers because it could signal a potential feedback loop of a naturally driven cycle that gets worse as the climate warms.
And there's nothing we can do about that. The climate warms, it releases more methane, and it makes everything warmer still.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
However, studies do show that cuts to human-driven methane emissions from the fossil fuel and agriculture industries would have big benefits, reducing near-term global warming. NOAA's announcement came just days after UN scientists warned world governments are not acting fast enough to cut emissions to avoid dangerous climate impacts.
So that's not the good news, right?
Nope. In energy geopolitics, Japan has joined the EU and the U.S. to target Russia's energy sector for the first time. Japan will ban Russian coal imports that fund Russia's war in Ukraine. But like several EU countries, Japan has resisted calls from Ukraine to ban Russian oil and gas altogether. As environmental journalist Peter Sinclair of Climate Crocs notes, quote, "No one fights over sunlight and wind. As long as we are dependent on fossil fuels, autocrats like Vladimir Putin will lust for oil fields like those in eastern Ukraine and use fossil gas as a weapon against democracy."
Good point.
In other news, plastic pollution is pervasive around the entire planet, from the top of Mount Everest to the deepest oceans, and now in people.
That is definitely not the good news.
First, a small study in the Netherlands found tiny pieces of microplastics in the blood of nearly 80% of the people tested, demonstrating that the particles can travel around the body and may lodge in organs.
Good God.
A second study found microplastics deep in the lungs of living people for the first time. The scientists said more research is needed to understand the health consequences of microplastics found in humans, but they are concerned because laboratory studies have shown microplastics can cause damage to human cells. But here's the good news.
Okay.
The Biden Department of Transportation has reversed a Trump rollback of fuel efficiency standards for cars, minivans, SUVs, and pickup trucks. The new standards ratchet up so that by 2026, new vehicles sold in the United States will average 49 miles per gallon, saving consumers billions in fuel costs.
That is if those standards are allowed to move forward in 2026 by President Trump.
In Boston... In Boston.
Shook you up a little, did I?
In Boston, Democratic Mayor Michelle Wu, the first woman and the first person of color to serve in that city's top office, announced that Boston will shift its entire fleet to non-polluting all-electric vehicles, starting with school buses, to cut the city's emissions and its air pollution.
There's some good news.
This will be a big step forward in making sure that we are delivering the clean air, public health, opportunity, the right start and end to your day coming to and from the Boston Public Schools.
Very nice. Are they going to add seatbelts to the school buses while they're at it?
Good question.
Thank you.
And finally, the Los Angeles City Council has voted unanimously to electrify the city's entire fleet of more than 10,000 vehicles as part of its plan to become the first U.S. city to rely on zero-carbon energy by 2035. The plan includes creating jobs by greatly expanding the city's EV charging network.
That is good news. 10,000 vehicles?
At least.
All right. Well, if we're doing it, everyone else in the country can too. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday, you may remember me talking about the truckers down on the border blocking the southern border on the Mexico side. Because look, Greg Abbott decided, hey, it's be a good idea. We're going to stop every single truck and we're going to inspect every single truck, and we're going to let all the produce go rotten. We're going to stop these trucks from making their deliveries on time. We're going to harass and intimidate, and we're going to do all of this stuff because we can. and I said yesterday, before this really hit big news, that this was an opportunity for Abbott to make things worse for Biden, because what this is really going to do is cause more inflation. So when you're going to buy strawberries or whatever produce you buy, the costs are going to skyrocket because there's going to be less produce at your supermarket because they're boogering up the whole thing. Now, I've said from the beginning, I'm against the way we do cross-border trucking. I've been against it for a very long time. I like the way it was done back, well before NAFTA. But we are where we are. This is politically motivated. This is because he can. And here to share some thoughts on what's going on our southern border, and maybe tell us what's going on and what we should be doing. I've asked Rick Levy to come talk with us. Rick is the president of the Texas AFL-CIO. He is down in Texas now. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. I mean, damn, you paint a really pretty picture of what's going on down here. So, talking about it, it's just like each day you wonder, how can it get worse? How can it get weirder? We have a state that we're in the energy capital of the world, allegedly, and we can't keep the lights on. We defund our public schools. We create all these kind of side issues around trans kids and some of the meanest orders that I've ever seen from a governor, going after doctors and parents for trying to take care of their kids. And now, in the midst of all of this, he decides, and I just want to say, they're not inspecting the trucks for smugglers or contraband. They don't have the legal authority to do that. What they're doing is inspecting the trucks for mechanical issues and inspection stickers and things like that, and stopping everyone. And I think that just really highlights the hypocrisy of what's going on here. You said it. It's trying to create more of a crisis. It's trying to compete with Florida about who can be the Trumpiest non-Trump. And that's what's driving public policy in Texas, and it's a damn shame.
No, and this is one of those things where I think people have to be aware. We're in a moment where everybody's hyper aware of inflation. We're all being socked by it.
Yeah.
Every time we turn around, price increases are happening. If it's not the energy, you're not going to the gas pumps getting screwed there because, hey, the oil companies are gouging the heck out of us because they're not increasing production even though they could, and they've got leases that are already out there, and Biden's given out, thousands of them. It's this stuff going on. It's the leveraging that's going on because Greg Abbott can. And
it's sabotage. It's sabotage. It's the same thing that's happening on the national scene when Obama was elected. What did Mitch McConnell say he was going to do? he was going to make sure that he was a one-term president. He was going to stop everything that Obama tried to do. That's what they're doing. So now the whole point is to create a political crisis and blame it on Biden, and to avoid, frankly, dealing with the shit that he's created. See, can I say that?
No.
Dealing with the stuff. I'm sorry. Dealing with the stuff that he's created. We're a failed state right now. We are a failed state in terms of operating government for the people. And rather than deal with those issues, we're doing stunts like this that, as you point out, are going to raise prices for every single person in this country, and going to, really cause deep hardship on the border. People don't understand the dependence that folks on the border have for commerce. People, before all this craziness, the border was like a little thing. I mean, people shop back and forth, they go back and forth, they get goods back and forth, they go to the doctor back and forth. And now, people are living in severe hardship. And the truckers, those guys were stuck on that bridge for over 24 hours with no food, no water, no place to go to the bathroom, and just stuck there. And so ultimately today, Abbott had to cave and open up the border, but only in one place. And so we're still, in all of the other places in Texas, we're still dealing with this. And unfortunately, y'all are going to pay the price too.
No, I mean, this makes Chris Christie's Bridgegate look like just a mild prank. I mean, to be honest, because this affects the entire country. This isn't just New York.
Yeah, and the other thing that it's what he's really trying to show is that he is the right-wing border person. And it's so bad, Rick, that he has spent $4 billion, that's with the B, dollars on this quote unquote border security, where he has sent National Guard troops down there for over a year. And what the reports are coming out now is that those National Guard folks have nothing to do. Suicides are at an all-time high among National Guard troops. And the one thing that's really interesting is that those National Guard troops are unionizing with the Texas State Employees Union. National Guard troops, Rick, are unionizing with the Texas State Employees Union because of the horrific conditions that they're down there being a political stunt. National Guard folks, they have lives. They're supposed to be called up in times of emergency. These folks are being away from their families, away from their jobs, and sitting down there. The latest report was that they've all been patrolling the ranches of his wealthy campaign contributors. That's all they do to guard against trespassing. And so in the face of that, now we see this thing where we're literally tying up the whole border just so that he can continue to wave the flag and scapegoat immigrants for all the problems that he and his minions are causing.
And the amount of money is just obscene.
$4 billion. $4 billion.
It must be nice that you guys have the best education system, the best healthcare, the best roads. It must be great to have a perfectly funded state.
Yeah, that we have all this extra cabbage lying around. It's absurd.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Rick Levy, president of the Texas AFL-CIO, talking about what's going on down on the southern border. What did you think of Marsha Blackburn's thought to wall off the southern border of Tennessee? Are you in favor of a border between Tennessee and Alabama?
I think connecting the words Marsha Blackburn and thought in the same sentence doesn't really compute in my head. And I mean, if it wasn't so sad, it would be silly. It would be funny. I wouldn't dignify that with even. I mean, what are you supposed to? What do you do with that? I mean, how do you even respond to that in a way that makes sense? No. It's absurd.
Now, what we're told is, the news that I've been seeing is that things are just horrible in Texas because now you're being overrun by migrants coming through. What does the border look like that you're seeing?
Yeah. So the border, it's first of all those we're not overrun by anybody, but it is true that there's some really horrific conditions down there. Because we still are dealing with the legacy of Donald Trump's Title 42, where we're consigning people who are fleeing persecution to living in squalor and horrible conditions, and that needs to stop. We still are not complying with international law. What we're doing down there also is we're stuffing the jails full of people because Abbott can't enforce immigration laws. but he's got National Guard people down there arresting people all over the border region for trespassing. And that's a state crime, and they're sitting in state jails, and we're paying for all of that at the same time. And a lot of the border communities I was down there, I guess 2 weeks ago, talking to some teachers, and just the level of stress that it's all putting on, public teachers and public servants to deal with all this stuff. It's tough. I mean, it is an area that needs a solution. It doesn't need demagoguing. It doesn't need scapegoating. It doesn't need racism.
And this is the thing that gets me. I mean, all we seem to get out of the right wing is what you said, the kind of demagoguery, the kind of, the kind of solutions that only cause more problems. And they do it so that they can, get headlines. They do it so that they can get further ahead politically. It isn't about actually good governance. It isn't about solving problems. It's about, hey, look at me, and hey, send me campaign contributions more than anything. And that, that's a problem.
I'm against that. Yeah. And the thing is, there are such interesting and exciting things going on in Texas. We have Beto O'Rourke is running for governor. And Rick, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but he is running on an explicitly pro-union, pro-jobs, pro-climate jobs campaign. Explicitly running on pro-public education, and the race is tightening, and I think it's driving Abbott to go more and more, crazy with his folks. We have some really cool organizing going on in unions down here in Texas. Unions are investing in Texas in a way that has never happened before, and we see the results as like the Houston airport just adopted a $15 blanket executive order. Minimum pay. Same things going on in Dallas. They're organizing. Starbucks are organizing. Meatpacking plants are organizing. Nonprofits are people are organizing. And so I think that the thing that lifts my spirits as we talk about how how outrageous these Abbott executive orders are is that there really is a counter movement going on that I think is going to continue to grow and grow until we change the state. The farther and the crazier they get, I got to think someday people are going to wake up.
Yeah, I keep saying that. I keep hoping that at least. And
at some point,
I'm predicting 22 is going to be a bloodbath for Democrats, and the Republicans are going to go further off the extreme where Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, they're going to be mild compared to what we're going to end up with. And my hope is that we wake up and go, no, this is a bit too far, and we rubber band back to somewhere near sane. But I don't know that to be the case.
Yeah, I'm not confident in that. I keep saying, and I can't tell you how many times I've said, oh, well, this one is going to do it. I mean, once they see this one, they're all going to come to their senses, and it's not happening. And I think the problem is that there's no ability to have a conversation because people wind themselves up in these little bubbles where all they hear is constant reinforcement of this craziness. It's not like they even know what's going on. It's not even like they get another side to even think about. And so I wish I was more confident, but what I am confident in is that the labor movement in Texas is going to be fighting and clawing and scratching.
Yeah, so let's go back to the trucking.
To send the state in a different direction.
Let's go back to the trucking situation right now. Tomorrow, what are they going to continue the inspections tomorrow? Are we expecting this to go long term? Yeah. And what do you expect the Biden administration to do? Is there anything that Biden can do to stop this? Is there anything that the truckers can do? Anything here?
Well, I think that what we saw today was Abbott trying to, as we say down here, crawfish and try and figure a way out of this thing, because not only are the truckers pissed, not only are the folks on the border pissed, but Republican businesses are pissed because they can't, can I say pissed? Or mad because they can't, I'm sorry, that's twice. I won't do it again, I promise. I'm going to clean it up. Because like you said, this is hurting everybody and it's not accomplishing anything. So he opened up one bridge today in Pharr, Texas, Pharr. And my sense is that he will be forced to retreat from this. You know what he does? He comes out with this stuff. Like, for example, he came up with this stunt that he was going to take all the migrants that came across the border and put them on a bus to DC. This was his big thing. I think it was last week. And then you look at the fine print and, oh, well, only if they want to go. And, oh, yeah, so the first bus came and there was like 20 people or something it's like, it's just, he's gotten what he wanted out of it, which is to get attention and to raise money. And so now I think you'll see him kind of move away from and move on to the next thing.
And on to the next thing. That's the scary part. I mean, it's always what's next and what's going to be worse. But in the meantime, we're going to end up paying more at the grocery store for the things that our families need. And I hope people will, when they go, pay more for their produce at the grocery stores and more for the products that were coming across that southern border, because we do an awful lot of trade with Mexico. I hope that they'll at least understand that part of the inflation that we're suffering is because of Greg Abbott and these policies.
Yeah, we call it the Abbott tax, and it's one that we're paying, and the other one that we're paying is that the natural gas folks made billions of dollars during the freeze when we were out of power for weeks, and in order to make up that margin, he's put a tax on every consumer's electric bill for the next decade to make up for that money. So there's plenty of Abbott taxes running around. This is just another one.
Just another one. Rick, I appreciate
one thing, Rick, I want to say, I don't know if you saw, I know that Ted Cruz was really vigorously supporting the truckers convoy when they were coming to DC. I've been looking at the news. I haven't seen Ted lining up with the Mexican truckers today. Have you seen that? Have you seen Ted on that
I have
program?
not.
No. Interesting.
But I have called on the truckers convoy to make that detour and head on down there and support their brothers and sisters and their fellow truckers down there.
There you go. Okay.
That's what they should be doing.
You're
solidarity.
Right.
There you go. Cross border.
Yes, sir.
Rick, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Hey, Rick, thank you so much for having me. I apologize for saying the bad things sometimes, but it's sometimes things need to be said. Anyway, hang in there. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for your work, and let's talk again sometime.
Anytime. Our good friend Rick Levy, president of the Texas AFL-CIO. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is the Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you check out the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. And that's one of those things. Look, I said from the beginning, these truckers, I stand with them. At the end of the day, we should be standing with the truckers of the trucker convoy and making sure that they have an opportunity to, to be heard, to be seen, to be, to make a living. And, where is Ted Cruz? That is a good question. It really is. That is a good question. Now, interesting that he brought up energy. In a place like Texas, you'd think that they would have an abundance of it. And like he said, they got to make up those profits, got to gouge where they can. Now, I found it interesting that well, Joe Manchin. Yes, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin evidently said to a group that there's this idea of rebranding or rerouting the Keystone XL pipeline. Evidently, he visited Canada recently, and he said the brand of the XL pipeline is probably gone. Can it be rebranded? Can it be rerouted? Can it be these different things? He added that not sure what the Biden administration was going to do, but it made me think that I'm sure whatever Biden wants, this has got to be something that is going to, I'm sure Manchin's going to push for. Now understand, the Keystone Pipeline is pumping. It's operational. It's pumping crude as we speak. The Keystone XL pipeline, that was going to take the dirty stuff, the tar sands oil, and that was going to move it right through the indigenous lands, right through some water, some really important, through Nebraska and some waterways, and some place that you really don't want it to go, considering that this stuff is like the dirtiest of the dirty, this thick, acidic, nasty, corrosive stuff that, well, we know has a history of eating through pipelines and leaking and causing all kinds of chaos. And what we also know is this was never going to help us because we don't actually have a refinery in this country to refine this nasty stuff. This was going to go right through the middle of our country, right out through Texas and out into the international community. This is never going to help us. So anyone who tells us, if we just had that Keystone XL pipeline, this would solve our problems, they're lying to you. Now, should we be drilling more in this moment? Yeah, we should be increasing production, and I agree with that. But that's not Joe Biden. And this is where all those people are, you're not a working class person, you don't know. Yeah, I do know. I know what the energy companies are saying. I've heard their calls. Their calls are like, screw this, we don't need to increase production. We like the prices high. Why? Because it's putting more money in our pocket. Because that's corporate America. Corporate America is happy where prices are. It means they're fattening the bottom lines. Perfect story today. You wonder why food prices are high? You wonder why when you go to the grocery store, prices are really high? Part of it is we just created 3 new billionaires. James, Austin, and Mary Ann Cargill are all newly certified billionaires. They're in the new ranks of the top 500 world's richest people. They each now have a new wealth of $5.3 billion, up 20%. Up 20%. That's weird. Their wealth's up 20%. Inflation's been up pretty high, I wonder. Now, Cargill is one of the oldest, founded back in 1865, one of the biggest privately held companies, massive producer of grain and food. Numerous people on the billionaire list, worth billions of dollars. And, what's going on? Well, they're getting richer. Why? Because prices are high. And again, why are prices high? Because they're gouging the crud out of us. And yet, what I keep getting from people, Joe Biden's fault. And you go, no, dummy. This is corporate America's fault. And this is where Joe Walsh is right. Democrats have not done a good job at messaging. There should, in this moment, and this is what FDR would have done. You go after these profiteers. You get a commission. And I said this during the pandemic. We need to get a Truman-esque commission to go after these pandemic profiteers. We need someone who's going to step forward and take this on and ensure that nobody gouges working class people the way they are. And then we hold them accountable. But that can only happen if you got sane, rational politicians who are going to fight for them. You got a Kirsten Sinema who's saying, we're not going to We're not going to raise a minimum corporate tax. You got problems. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. I'm on the go, never miss a minute. Quick break, right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that 25 delegates from 17 cities gathered in Washington, D.C. to discuss forming a union for laborers. General laborers, who often perform some of the most backbreaking work on projects like digging canals and surfacing streets, were often blocked from joining craft unions as full members. The laborers in D.C. decided it was time to join together and formed the International Hod Carriers and Building Laborers Union. That was the beginning of the union that today is called the Laborers International Union of North America, or LIUNA. The union published its first constitution in English, German, and Italian, reflecting the diversity of the members that they represented. At the convention, the delegates issued a Declaration of Principles. In it, they declared, quote, "We hold that all men are created free and equal, and that honor and merit makes the man, and that self-preservation is the first law of nature, and that he who would be free must strike the first blow." They then went on to describe their purpose, writing, quote, "First, to gather under one grand banner all of those who toil on buildings with our craft and calling. Second, to promote by all honorable means the social and financial standing of all those who wish to partake in the fruits of amalgamation. Third, to create general agitation for the purpose of making a universal 8-hour day to increase the wages of members of the craft. Fourth, to establish a system of conciliation and arbitration in different sections of our land. Fifth, to help members of the craft in securing lawful and profitable employment. For more than a century, LIUNA has fought for the rights of laborers.
I think we can now say the obvious. The Republican Party has gone bull-goose bonkers. Its leaders have turned the once proud GOP brand into an unprincipled gaggle of corporate profiteers, hate-mongers, and screwball conspiracy theorists. They're so far out that the Hubble telescope couldn't find them. But where is my Democratic Party? Here's a transformative opportunity to forge a solid political coalition, a multiracial, urban-rural, farm-labor alliance based on fundamental principles and programs of fairness and opportunity for all. Isn't that what the party says it stands for? This is the prime time to demonstrate it, to reach out and unite ordinary Americans behind a national agenda of lasting progressive change. It's not like the party elders would have to start from scratch, for an energized, feisty movement of grassroots battlers against corporate greed and government injustice is already organizing, winning, and growing popular support all across the country. But rather than welcoming and building on the exciting advances of these popular movements, the party's old-line insider clique of big funders, consultants, and corporate politicos passively assume that the GOP's goofiness and nastiness will turn off enough voters that Democrats can win by default. Meanwhile, the establishment insists that Democrats only push modest incremental reforms so as not to offend corporate funders or spook moderate Republicans. Hello, brilliant strategists. A primary function of the Democratic Party is to offend the corporate powers. Also, there are only about 6 moderate Republicans left in America, so appeasing them is not a big win, especially when it costs you the support of grassroots voters eager for a politics bold enough and big enough to end business-as-usual economics. This is Jim Hightower saying, as our own history teaches, it takes intentional gutsiness to create a politics that matters. Republicans won't do that. Will Democrats? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of great activity coming out around the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. In fact, you saw a bunch of tweets coming out from our friend Representative Andy Levin from Michigan, pointing out that, look, the General Counsel is now saying, hey, look, there's a better way to organize, kind of like we used to in the old days. And this is one of these weird moments where the things that she's talking about are the way it used to be. In fact, when I was doing organizing, back in the 90s, I would tell my grandfather about all the things that we were doing, all the obstacles and all the problems and he's like, what? That's not how we do it. And you know how older people, and I do it to my kids. That's not how we did it when I was your age. And you know what? He was right. It was better back then, and which is why I'm glad that she's bringing this back and here to share some thoughts on, what Jennifer Abruzzo is doing and what the General Counsel at the NLRB is bringing up. And will this stick? Will this help? Will this make a difference? I've asked our good friend, labor lawyer and, labor lawyer superhero, Paul Secunda. Paul, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick, for having me as always.
So let's start with this, what the General Counsel's throwing out here, this idea, this Joy Silk doctrine. We've been talking about it here recently. And as I told you during the break, back in the day, it's not something that I knew about. Kind of understood that back in the old days, it wasn't always like what we were going through, forced to go through elections, forced to go through captive audience meetings, forced to go through employers browbeating employees. Yeah. But, we're in this moment here all along, maybe possibly could have avoided some of all that. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it's a big moment. It's monumental. A lot of these statements by the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board are statements that some of us in the labor law community have been waiting for literally decades. For instance, with captive audience meetings, where you bring in people and you force them to listen to anti-union rants. Employees don't want to hear it. Doesn't matter. They had to sit there. They had to listen. And if they didn't want to listen, if they even spoke out, they could be fired. And I and others had argued many, many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, that that's ridiculous. That's coercive. That's in restraint of their Section 7 rights, and they shouldn't be subjected to that. And yet, that was the law, probably from about 1960 until perhaps today. And what the General Counsel has said is, look, that's a reprisal. Forcing people to listen without being able to communicate is not speech. It's not employer speech protected by Section 8C of the National Labor Relations Act. It is coercive, intimidating conduct in violation of Section 8A1. It's an unfair labor practice. We're not going to have it. Similarly, the Joy Silk doctrine, which is just a fancy, fun name for a doctrine that used to require an employer to show good faith doubt that a union no longer had a majority, or that there wasn't a majority who wanted that union to be in place. That they changed that, so it was much easier for employers to decertify unions. We've seen a lot of that, of course, lately, and the hope is, Rick, that these statements, these initiatives by the current General Counsel of the NLRB will put the thumb back on the scale so it's a little more evenly balanced and workers can truly be represented by someone of their own choosing if that's what they want.
Yeah. Now, I go back to the reason I bring up my grandparents, because both of them were big union activists. They were both union members virtually all of their working lives. My grandfather actually, in numerous workplaces, worked to get unions into those workplaces. And the stories that he told were not these Herculean leaps of, worrying about, is your job going to be on the line? Do you have to go through the kind of captive audience, brow beatings that come along with this? Yeah. And I remember telling him these things, and he couldn't believe it, that, in this country where you have the right to organize, and he kept coming back to this, his generation firmly believed and internalized that they had a right to organize. It was their right, and they fought for that right, and they demanded their rights. And this is one of those moments where I hope by seeing what she's putting out, and maybe it once again makes us look at the National Labor Relations Act And look at this, for 85 years, the Supreme Court has affirmed that we have the right, a fundamental right to organize. And maybe as workers, we go, yeah, it's our right, and damn it, we're going to fight for it.
Let's hope so. I mean, when the Wagner Act was first passed in 1935, it was very clear that its purpose was to promote collective bargaining by allowing workers to organize into units of their own choosing and to use that collective power to bargain more beneficial terms and conditions of employment. Now, what happened was, starting in 1947 with the Taft-Hartley Act, we had a pushback. We had a movement by conservatives who actually overrode the veto of President Truman at the time and basically said it's not about promoting collective bargaining, it's really about free choice. And they kind of put all their weight on this idea of free choice, that we don't care what employees do as far as unions, not unions, but we want them to have free choice. Of course, this was a sleight of hand. This was a sleight of language, because what employers were able to do is use language and other types of conduct to threaten, intimidate, and otherwise make it impossible for employees to actually engage in a free and open vote. And as a result, a lot of employees were not actually voting how they felt. There was a famous statistic, Rick, and you might be familiar with it, called the representation gap. It's the yearly gap that we see between how many employees help unions win elections in this country versus how many employees say, like in a Gallup poll or a Pew Research poll, that they're either in favor of unions or they themselves would like to be in a union. And there is a gap. There is a substantial gap between those who say they want to be in a union and those who will actually vote yes in a union, because they're scared, they're intimidated, they're browbeated. So all of what's happening in the last week and today is welcome news if we really care about promoting collective bargaining and true free choice, as far as whether workers want to be in a union or not.
No, and to that point, if these captive audience meetings didn't work, if the millions of dollars they spend on these union busters coming in and browbeating your employees didn't work, corporate America wouldn't be spending the money. If the return on investment wasn't there, they wouldn't be spending it. If Amazon wasn't getting what they wanted out of these union busters coming in, they wouldn't be spending $200 million in Bessemer, Alabama, to deny 5,000 workers the right to have a say in that one workplace. They wouldn't be spending that kind of money.
Well, because they know that once workers get that right and that power, others are going to want it too. Look at the Starbucks situation. It started with one. I think we're up to 18 or 19 bargaining units now, including in the home store in Seattle. So what happens is, when workers are actually told the truth, understand what the union brings to them, it equalizes power in the workplace. It's when you say to workers, okay, your employer's Amazon, you are one individual. Do you think that you have any ability to bargain any term or condition of employment with Amazon? And the answer is, of course you don't. It's a take it or leave it situation. And if you don't like it, go somewhere else. Well, that's true with one person. But what if there are units that are made up of hundreds or thousands of workers who can truly upset the operations of the company, can disrupt the company until they're treated with dignity and fairness? Well, you change the calculation. Yeah. And that's all we're talking about. We're trying to equalize the field between the so-called industrial combatants here.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Paul Secunda, former labor law professor, current labor superhero attorney, one of my favorite guys on the planet. And I say that because I think you're a really good guy. You're
one of those, you too.
I think you're one of those people out there fighting the good fight, Paul. I really do.
We should start a mutual admiration society.
But here's the thing. You said a moment ago, it's about language, and we hear the language of choice. We hear the language of freedom. We hear the language of liberty. And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. They throw this kind of, it's on the individual. You're going to have, we do it with education. We do it with a lot of things. And usually it's the choices you get are between bad and much worse, or really no choice at all. And it seems like we're moving back to the bad old days, well before the Wagner Act, well before my grandparents' generation knew they had rights, to the old days of, well, if you were desperate enough and hungry enough to work in deplorable conditions for poverty wages, well, that was your liberty. It was your liberty to contract with whoever you wanted. I still see us moving in this direction because of our Supreme Court. Now, as you said to me during the break, this is a great moment. We're in a moment, but sadly things can change. And this is where, I'm thrilled that Jennifer Abruzzo is moving us in the direction. I'm thrilled we've got the most pro-union president that we've had in my lifetime. I'm thrilled that there's all this energy of people going, yes, we are demanding unions, and yes, there's all this want now. But the moneyed interest, they play the long game, and they're still pushing. They're still pushing to take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s, back to the old Lochner era, which I see coming back.
I was wondering when you were going to use that awful word, Lochner. For your listeners, Lochner was a case called Lochner versus New York, United States Supreme Court, 1905, where they basically were asked to look at bakers and whether they could be forced to work insane hours at their employer's behest, or whether we could have maximum hour laws. And the Supreme Court, which was ruled by kind of the same types of conservatives that were ruled by today, said, well, it's freedom of contract. It's liberty of contract. And if employees want to work 100 hours a week, and if they die because of that, well, that's their choice. And of course, that is hogwash. I would have used another word, but this is a family show.
Thank you.
And it's hogwash because, of course, you can't make a free choice when your choice is a Hobson's choice, meaning, it's either work 100 hours or not work at all. So what are you going to do? You're going to work because you have to put food on the table. You have to keep shelter over your family's head. And so this was the situation from about 1905 until about 1935, when we finally got the Wagner Act. The Wagner Act was upheld as constitutional under a case called Jones and Laughlin in the late 1930s. And since then, we've been passing protective legislation, whether it be for overtime and minimum wages, whether it be for pensions and health plans, whether it be for occupational safety and health. But what we're seeing now is a move by the moneyed interests, the Koch brothers and others of the similar ilk, who are pushing, in particular, mandatory arbitration clauses, which require you not to work together with your brothers and sisters to make your workplace better, but require you individually in an unaccountable setting, meaning in front of an arbitrator who doesn't even put out decisions that are precedential. You have to fight this fight alone individually, and if you lose, oh well. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing kind of a pushback through mandatory arbitration to Lochner and the freedom of contract. Now, I will say to you one thing. There was one good development in this area, Rick, and I don't know if you've talked about it on your previous shows, but they did outlaw so-called non-disclosure agreements within arbitration when it comes to sexual harassment and sexual assault. That's great, but it needs to be expanded to all sorts of workplace problems. Sexual harassment, yes, but also if there's an issue regarding union organizing, or if there's an issue involving occupational safety and health, or if there's an issue involving, fair payment of overtime and other types of wages that people earn. Until we have that, employees are going to be forced into this idea of freedom of contract in the form of mandatory arbitration, and they're going to have very few rights in the workplace at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this is one of these things for me, these are the issues that I think we need to really be focused on come election time. And it's not. These are things that very few people ever talk about or know very little about, which is why I think it's so important to have people like you come on and explain this, because it can be complicated. This is kind of a weedy thing, but it's something that the right wing, the moneyed interest, the think tank world, the state policy network, the Koch brothers, it's something that they know, and they know well. And it's something, to be honest, that they've used to their advantage to make our lives worse. Because look, the reality is CEO pay didn't go up nearly 1,000% over the last 50 years, whereas workers' pay has only gone up 12% just by happenstance. It's happened because they've been crushing labor unions and crushing our ability to demand better wages, hours, and conditions. And they've been doing it within the confines of the NLRB, taking over the NLRB and through the courts. And this is where, again, this is part of why this stuff is so important.
Yeah, we always talk, you and I, Rick, about the importance of having good Supreme Court justices, and hopefully Justice Brown will fit that mold exactly. I know in her previous decisions, she seems to have understood the importance of legislation like this and why it is constitutional and permissible. But, you know, the problem is when you have decisions, like a few years ago, there was a decision called EPIC, which permitted mandatory arbitration clauses, even though they're in violation of allowing collective action under the National Labor Relations Act, EPIC systems. There's also been laws, of course, called right to work, which, as we know, doesn't really mean right to work. It means the right to work for less, or the right to not be able to organize because we can't, as unions, get membership dues. These are all well thought out ploys through ALEC, through the Koch brothers, through the Chamber of Commerce, through National Federation of Businesses. I mean, you name it, they are all in this together to try to deny power from workers. And if we believe that if we vote in a way that is, you know, it seems like it's for our pocketbook, but it really isn't. If we're not voting for labor rights, if we're not voting for politicians who will put into place judges and others who will uphold labor rights, union rights, then quite literally, but also figuratively, we're going to be poorer for it.
No, there's no question about this. So last question I've got for you on this, because again, I'm thrilled that the general counsel is moving in this direction and being much more of an advocate, and I would argue, trying to do the mission of the act, which is to encourage, not just to be there as a neutral arbitrator, but to actually encourage people to join and form unions, because this is one of those central tenet kind of things. It's not just to be there to be the referee, but to actually be there to go, we as a government want people joining and forming unions. We want people fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, because we know it's beneficial for all of society. Do you fear, as some have, because I've gotten some people going, well, she's a little too far out there, Rick. The blowback, is going to be just as bad on the other side. Thoughts on that kind of thinking?
Well, the blowback has already started. If you look at the budget request that the NLRB made this year, they got nothing. Other labor agencies, OSHA, the Employee Benefits Security Administration, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, all got additional monies to run their agencies. The NLRB alone was the one that didn't get any money in addition to what they've run in previous years. And that's because the general counsel is being an advocate. And you're right. She is actually, if you read the preamble of the National Labor Relations Act, it says we need to promote collective bargaining in order to diminish industrial strife. If we don't have a system whereby we can channel industrial disputes into a constructive mechanism whereby labor and management can figure out their differences, we are going to either have one party having too much power, which is what we have with management right now, or we're going to have more industrial strife in the form of strikes, boycotts, pickets, and we've seen a lot more of that as well. So I think already the general counsel and her agency are being punished by the Republicans in Congress. I'm not sure outside of President Biden and a few others in the Congress that the Democrats are doing enough to support the National Labor Relations Board. And you know what's going to happen, Rick, if the Republicans come back into power in the Congress after 2022. We'll have the veto of the president, but otherwise it could get very ugly very quickly. And absolutely, when the board, when and if, I mean, it's not an if, it's a when the board becomes Republican dominated again, it will flip back hard in favor of management interests, just like we saw with the previous general counsel, who didn't even believe in the act. He thought his role, was to destroy unions, which is remarkable, given that's completely contrary to what the law says. So,
but very predictable.
I'm worried a little bit, but let's enjoy today and let's build momentum so that we prevent that from happening in the future.
There you go. Paul, as always, great stuff. I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Okay, you're welcome, Rick.
Our good friend Paul Secunda, former law professor, labor superhero in my view, does fabulous work. You just heard. I mean, he's a bright guy. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Some thoughts on the other side to wrap things up. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. Labor leader and socialist Eugene V. Debs was sent to prison for speaking out against World War I. Debs was a well-known figure. In 1894, he had led the American Railway Union out on a strike against the Pullman Railway Car Company. 250,000 railway workers walked off the job in support of the strike until it was brutally crushed by the United States military. Debs was arrested and served time in prison for his role in the strike. Due to his popularity, government officials were alarmed by Debs' pacifist stance. So, in 1917, when he gave a speech against World War I in Canton, Ohio, he was arrested under the Espionage Act. The act had been passed a few months prior, making it illegal to interfere with the armed services recruitment efforts during wartime. At his trial at a federal court in Cleveland, Ohio, Debs defended himself. In his final statement, he explained his motivation. I am thinking this morning of the men in the mills and the factories, of the men in the mines and on the railroads. I am thinking of the women who for a paltry wage are compelled to work out their barren lives, of the little children who in this system are robbed of their childhood. He was found guilty, and so on this date he started his 10-year sentence. In Cleveland, infuriated unionists and socialists led a protest of Debs' imprisonment. Violence broke out during the march. Mounted police and even tanks were brought in to suppress the demonstrators. In the aftermath, 2 people were killed, more were injured, and dozens were arrested. While in prison, Debs ran for president of the United States on the socialist ticket, receiving nearly 1 million votes. Finally, in 1921, President Harding commuted Debs' sentence to time served. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. You know, the reality is, and listen, you know, one of the things I love about Paul is, you know, he'll give us the history lesson every which way possible because, look, he's a bright guy. I could sit and listen to him all day long. And the thing that he hit on, I think is most important, the language that they used. You know, it's about choice, it's about freedom, it's about liberty, and yet they know, as he pointed out, they know that they can scare the bejeebus out of people. They know that they can just get into your ear, that they can plant that seed that, you know, you vote for a union, we might close this place. You know, they're going to take all of your power away. You didn't have any power to begin with. You know, our open door policy that you never use, that has never worked for you, you know, that could close to you. And they do this, and they're very, well, they're very cagey about how they do this stuff. And a lot of times they're right out in front about it. But, you know, one of my favorite messaging things that they do is this, you know, people aren't choosing unions anymore. And the reason a lot of people aren't doing it because a lot of people don't want to go through the browbeating and the harassment and the intimidation. And this thing by the general counsel, this is kind of a BFD. This is kind of a big deal. This is kind of taking it back to where my grandparents' generation, they overwhelmingly said, yeah, it's what we want. And, oh, by the way, we're going to negotiate. There was none of this, oh, let's have captive audience meetings. Oh, let me harass you for a couple of months, and then we'll hold an election. There was no, we're marching on the office. Tomorrow we begin negotiations. That's how my grandparents' generation did it. I think they had something there. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick